Well, hey, welcome back, everybody. It's been a while. I've been on vacation for a while. I was also under the weather for a little bit, and I've been also taking a step back and thinking how I want to approach this next phase of the evolution of the Fleet Series game. I put a poll up on Facebook and asked what people want, and 80% plus asked for an AI opponent, which I can understand that. I think honestly, if I asked myself, I'd much rather have the ability to get into the game and have a computer opponent more than having the ability to play against somebody on another computer somewhere in the world. I think it would be cool to do a player on player, and probably be a little easier to implement. But y'all asked for AI opponents, so I'm going to talk about how I'm starting to um, digest that beast. I'm definitely not going to go straight to implementing some type of machine learning process into this code that will learn from moves that you make in real time and get smarter as you go. That's not the way AI works. AI is a process and a coding process that takes a lot of data. It needs data in order to be smart, and we don't have enough data at first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to approach this like I'm going to build an automated opponent and try to put as much intelligence as I can in that. Probably won't be super intelligent at first, but it'll get smarter as I learn more about how I want to approach the coding. But the goal would be that over time, I will start trying to collect data and maybe even set the game to play against itself in a certain scenario so that it determines it learns moves that it can do for that particular scenario. A very generic AI that will just work globally, no matter what scenario you set up, is something that I would love to have, but I don't think it's something that's achievable within the near term. So you can't get there unless you take steps forward. So I'm going to show you the approach that I'm taking, and it's using the construct of logics. Okay, so that's a concept that a lot of large strategic games and games that allow people um, to create scenarios. It's a concept that a lot of them use, where you create objects that really don't represent anything actually physical in the game. It doesn't represent a ship or a fleet or a base or anything like that. It just represents a concept, and you use those logics to give your automation the ability to pick things and then determine what it wants to do. Okay, so I'm going to kind of have a few videos where I'm going to kind of start showing how I'm developing that. And hopefully, someone watching along will kind of understand where I'm going with it, maybe even have some pointers, the things that I can do to help it out. But let's get into it. So we are we're going to show a very small scenario. I'm just picking a very quick one. I think it's called the Battle of the Maldives. And in this situation, here's the Battle of Maldives, right? So this is a scenario that I've not built into the game yet. It's very tiny. It has a small amount of Indian forces, a couple of task forces, and their job is to stop the Americans from reinforcing the Malay Atoll. So I'm going to kind of show how, for a small scenario like this, you could set it up with using these different logic objects that theoretically I can then have this scenario play against itself, or have you play against an automated player. Now, a lot of the logic to actually make the automated player work has not been developed yet. So right now, I'm purely working on the use of logics to help with deployment and to help with the automated side picking an objective. Okay, so what that means is that you are largely in control of, as the game designer, in setting up how complex of a situation do you present the AI? How many objectives do you give it? You give it one single objective, then obviously the AI is going to pick that objective. You give it a bunch of different objectives or a bunch of different variants of that objective or different things like that, then you'll see obviously a little more individuality from the automated opponent and um, and a little more unpredictability if you're playing against them. Okay, so let's talk about the logic objects, and let's also talk about some of the new features that I added in. So first thing I'm going to show you is on the settings. Okay, notice there's now two new settings that have been popped up that'll be here. Okay, they both start off with none. These are your AI, right? Your AI, I guess how you want to put it is, what is the AI behavior of each side? So currently, this is neither have AI. So this would be a standard game where you would be responsible for doing every move. If I set the Soviets to cautious or normal or aggressive or none, let's set them to normal. Um, uh, there's there's not a whole lot of logic that differentiates between normal and aggressive, but I know that I'll need that eventually, right? Like on how often does a side choose to use its interceptors on cap? Right? If it's a cautious approach, then it's more likely going to use its interceptors on cap versus not use them on cap and send them on missions to attack, right? So if it's aggressive, it's going to do things like that, right? So as you can see, by setting this value, right, later on functionality that I build will be able to take advantage of this setting. Notice I can do this for both. I can set the allies to cautious or normal or aggressive, but the fact is, if I set both of them to something that's not none, then the game technically, after you finish the setup phase, it's kind of out of your hands. The game is just going to start running itself. As a result, if you choose a situation where you run the game with both sides as I have added in a new phase that basically is like a natural pause. Essentially, at the end of each or at the beginning of each turn, there'll be a phase that simply is just allows you to see what's going on in the board. Otherwise, you actually won't see anything, right? Because it's moving behind the scenes and it's calculating things, right? But by giving you that phase, you'll actually see each turn where the units are, and you'll be able to tell like what strategy it's using, where are these ships going, what are the objectives that the AI has picked. But I'm not going to be able to show you that much right now. What I'm going to show you more is during the setup, how do we use logics to kind of start this whole way of programmatically providing information that the code can use to determine what it does on a turn by turn basis. Okay, so I've created two new types of objects. If you'll remember, old things like objectives, those are just I'll call those dumb, right? Because they have no logic behind them. You can still create those. They'll be for instance, let's create an objective here at coaching. And this will be and we'll make it let's see, switch to allies. We'll make this one an allies one. Actually, let me go back down. I don't know why it went there. Okay, so I'll have to look at that, make sure that that wasn't a problem there. So I'm going to create an objective here. And so as you notice, it's a larger objective thing. This is the thing where you can set it where, for your own purposes, if you want to know, well, what's that objective for? Well, you can set it where it's for amphibious ships, right? So, and FYI, this version with all these new features is not out right now. Okay, it's still in development. So, um, so this objective here is something you may still use in your scenarios just to help the user like know what they're trying to do. But the AI will ignore these objectives. Okay, the AI will not ignore objective logics um, and deployment logics. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this guy, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Fifth Fleet, and let's create an actual deployment logic. Okay, so we have a deployment logic. Notice that it's a smaller icon. Reason why it's smaller is because you're likely going to have a lot of these little units across all over the map, and I'm trying to limit the amount of clutter. Okay, now the this Soviet deployment logic, right? What does it do? Well, if you assign particular locations to it, then any any units that are linked to it, and I'll show you how to link them in a bit, will, when they deploy, will choose a random location within that logic's coverage. Okay? So, for instance, let's say we want anything using this particular deployment to appear anywhere in the Lackadives zone. So we put in the Lackadives zone, we say add this zone to coverage, and now this logic basically represents that if anything is linked to this, when it arrives, it'll arrive at a random location in this set. Okay? I'm going to go and clear those locations now because that's not what I want to use. Instead, if we look at the rules here, we'll see that the rules say that within 3 hexes of Cochin, you're going to have a task force of these 4 ships, the Virat, the Vikrant, the Mysore, and the Cavalry. Okay? So let's go ahead and set up that deployment logic. I'm going to move the deployment logic over here to Cochin. I'm going to say add hex radius to this, and I'm going to hit it 3 times. Add hex radius, add hex radius, add hex radius. It grows. Okay, so that means that now this deployment logic covers all of these locations. Okay, now it still won't do anything because no units are actually linked to it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create those units. Okay, so let's go ahead and create India carrier random. Let's create another one of this type random. Okay, I'm going to put them over here just out of the way, just just for grins. Okay, what else do we want to create? We also want to create a Indian destroyer, the Mysore. So I believe it's a Kashin. No, I think it's a Serenity. Yeah, it is. Mysore. Then finally, we're going to go back to one of the Indian frigates, which I believe might be a Project 15. Yeah, the Cavalry. There you go. I just happen to know these ships off the top of my head. Okay, so we created these 4 ships. Now, if you don't use any logics at all, if the game starts, they're going to start right here in this spot. Okay? What I'm going to instead do is this particular deployment logic, I'm going to just drag it over here just for organizational perspective. And notice now I have an option that says link to units in the hex. If I were to click on any one of these units, I could also link to it individually. So notice the Virat gives me an option to say link to deployment logic. Okay? I'm instead going to do all 4 just because to make it easier, right? I'm just going to say deploy logic, and I'm going to say link to units in the hex. Okay? Now, just because this notice that even though the marker for this logic is right here, it represents these locations. Okay? So, sure, to limit confusion, you could put it right here because it represents these things. But really, if you want to clear the board, you could take all these things and you can move them away. You can like put them up here somewhere, right? Or out of the way, someplace that we don't need them to be. Because its position here doesn't mean anything. What means something is the logic, the area that it represents. Okay? So now if we click on, let's see. So notice that you can't tell that these guys got linked to it. So I'm going to go here. There's a setting here that I added in called Show AI Logic. If you click this during this session, you'll be able to actually see the linkages. Okay? Reason why you might not want to see that is once the game starts, you may not want to see all that linkages, right? You might want a cleaner look. If you're viewing the game you may not want to see a bunch of lines on the map. So I give you the ability to hide those lines. They still exist, but you just don't see them if you click this option. So there we go. Okay, so now it shows that this guy, and if I separate them, you'll notice, look, all four of them actually. It added all four of them to that. So all four of them are technically linked to this deployment logic. Okay, and if I move this deployment logic here, it all moves. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that when the game starts, when you hit the deployment phase, these four ships will say, there'll be some logic. It'll say, hey, am I linked to any deployment logics? I am. If I'm linked to a deployment logic, pick a random location that is within the confines covered by that logic. Using a little bit of intelligence, it won't put it on land, right? So it knows not to put it on land. Okay, so it'll place it somewhere in a C hex. Okay, now if you keep them all separated like this, then when it does determine that, these four guys will all go to likely a different spot. But if you put them all in the same hex, okay, then the computer knows to treat them like a block. So that means when we start the scenario, these four ships will pick a location that's linked to this deployment logic, and all four of them will get placed in the same hex. So you see, by your placement of the records of the units, you can give the automation a different way of doing it. Okay. Now, um, if you're playing this side, if you're going to play the Indian side, then when the deployment happens, it'll pick a random spot, but then you'll still be in your deployment phase, so then you'll be able to move them around however you see fit. Okay? But for the automated side, right, it's out of your hands. That system will get on its turn, it'll use this logic and it'll figure out what location to go to. Okay? So that's the way deployment logics work. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave them here. So remember, it doesn't really matter if they're sitting off the coast. When the game starts, it'll look at this location, it'll look at these things, it'll move to somewhere in this group of hexes. Okay, and you have different ways of doing it, right? If we look at the next rules, right, it says here, together in any sea or restricted water hex in the Lakshadweep zone may deploy with other Indian units. Okay, so these four, Rana, Rajput, Ranjit, and Ranveer. Okay, so let's go ahead and create those guys. We'll move them to, let's see here, Surface, Indian, Destroyer. I believe those are cache-in mods. Yeah, let's see, which one is not included? Rana, Rajput, Ranjit, and Ranveer. Okay, so everything but the Ranvijay. I think the Ranvijay was the one I looked up, and that was one that the Indians have, but the game doesn't have include them. But so I'm gonna create these four guys. I'm gonna put them in their own little hex. Okay, let's do another one of this class. Let's pick the Rana. Another one of this class. Let's pick the Ranjit. One more, the Ranveer. Okay, now these guys, they're going to be under different deployment orders. Okay, so let's create another one. We'll go back over here to this thing. We'll create another deployment logic. We'll move that deployment logic over to here just to get it out of the way. And I'm going to say add this zone to coverage. And now I'm going to move it to here in the same hex so that the option comes up to say link to units in a hex. Okay, and now once I do that, I can move this thing around, back out, right? But essentially, now we have what? We have these four in a group in the same hex, linked to this deployment logic. We have this group linked to this deployment logic. Obviously, if you want to make things a little neater, you can move this group a little closer, just so you understand more. But really, the logic's going to do it no matter what. Now, I believe on this one it says here together. Okay, so we do want them together, and they may deploy with other Indian units. For a human player, you can definitely do that if you want, right? You're in control. It will propose something and it'll move it there when it starts the deployment phase. But then you as the leader of that group, you can move them. For the AI, though, it'll only end up with these guys if it just happens to be that they all end up landing in the same spot. Okay? So, um, all right, let's see what else. I think, okay, so for the Americans, they get an AV-8B and a P3 at the Mali Atoll. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that in here. Air US Interceptor. Um, let's see, where's your P3? Yeah, I remember. I actually don't give you the ability to. All my AV-8s that came with the counter set, I put them all on the carriers. So, um, you know, we could do whatever we want. So in this case, I'm probably just going to give the Americans something different than an AV-8B. I'll probably give them something like maybe an attack, maybe an A6 or an A10 or something like that. Let me see what I want to do. Hmm. I can just give them. I'll give them an F4 just for giggles. Okay. All right. And then what else? It's saying the Wisconsin, the Bainbridge, the Ingersoll, and the Waddell need to be together in any sea within 2 hexes of the Suva Diva, which is down here. Okay, so let's do the same. I'm going to create a deployment logic, put it right here. I'm going to add a hex radius to this guy. Okay, and then I'm now going to create the American ships here. So USA, BB, I believe it was the Wisconsin, right? Yeah, Wisconsin Bainbridge. Okay, so Wisconsin. Let's add a CG. Bainbridge. Let's move them up here. Okay. I think 2 more, right? What do we got? DD, the Ingersoll, which I believe is a Spruance. Which group is? I don't know. Let's see if we can find it. Ingersoll and Waddell. I think the Waddell is a. I think the Waddell might be an Adams. Let me see. It is. I'm getting a little too good at that. All right, so I got these 4 ships in there. Now notice all 4 of them there. So if I click on the deployment logic, now I can say link to units in the hex. Bang. Okay. So when the game starts, these guys together will get moved to a particular spot, um, two within 2. And then finally, together in any C hex in the West Indian zone whose last 2 digits are 38 or higher. Now, you can model that, okay? I'm going to do it a little differently, just for the purposes of the time. I don't think anybody wants to see me click individually each of these hexes to show that you could do that, but you can do that, okay? So we're gonna create a deployment logic. We're gonna put it over here, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna say, hey, they could be anywhere within, let's see, 38 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm gonna say I'm just gonna create a here, and I'm gonna add a hex radius of 3. Oops, clear locations. I hit the wrong button. Add a hex radius. Add a hex radius. Add 1 more hex radius. Okay, so you could do it this, right? And then what you could do is you can take it and you can now move it to every single other one you want this to cover. Okay. Unfortunately, the Fifth Fleet uses that construct a lot, so which is a little annoying. I'd much rather it say, "Hey, just anywhere in the West Indian zone," because it's a lot easier for me to just say, "Hey, everything within the West Indian zone," right? But either way, the point is, you can follow it exactly if you want to. So let's go ahead and create these guys here. It looks like for the USA, it's looking for what, 2 fast convoys, then the Jarrett and the Williams. All right, so let's FF. I think I'm not sure if the Jarrett and the Williams are. I don't know. Oh, there's the Williams. Okay, And then Jared is probably a, yep, Jared's another type of Perry. And then finally, we're going to add in a couple of fast convoys and then add to another this type. Yeah, bang. Okay. So now if I go to deployment logic and I say link to units in hex, now they're all linked together. Okay. So as you can tell, so setting using these logics to create deployment orders is pretty simple. Okay. You have complete control over what um, uh, what hexes it covers, and you can even do multiple. Okay. If for some reason I wanted to let's use this just for giggles. Okay, I'm gonna move this guy here too. Okay, just so that he's in the same hex as these guys, and I'm gonna say link to units in hex. Now when he does that, now okay, notice that these guys, and I'm gonna let's see, just to show you, right? Essentially, right, that group of 4 ships are linked to both of these things. So what does that mean? Well, it means probably what you think it means. It means that when it goes to the deploy, what the logic is going to do, it's going to first see, aha, I have 2 different logics I could use for deployment, so I'm going to pick one. And then after I pick one, I'm going to pick one of the values in here. So essentially, you can give pretty complex orders, right? If you want someone to be um, in any, let's say that the rules say put them in, they can be in the Sri Lankan and East Indian zone. So you could create a single deployment logic and put it into both and say add all this add all this zone, add this zone. So then that one logic says anybody using that logic will get placed in any hex within this zone or this zone. You can also create separate logics, one representing this zone, one representing this zone, and then assign both of those to the ship group. Okay, so you could it's pretty flexible, right? It'll pick any one of those, and then it'll pick a value in that group. And then after it deploys, it breaks its links with these things because at that point you don't need it doesn't need to be linked to these deployment logics anymore. Okay, so let's talk about objectives. Okay, so let's talk about it. So this group here, right? If we look at the rules for the game, I think it basically says that if they make it to, so at the moment a US FC unit enters Malay Atoll, it is removed from the map and can neither play or attack. But then you get points for it. Okay, so I think the amount of points it says it gives is, in this case, it says gives 10 for undamaged reaching Malay Atoll. Okay, so I think that's pretty straight up. So essentially what we can do is we can now create a objective logic. Okay, bang. So now I created objective logic. I'm going to put it right in this hex. I'm going to say it's an objective type of destination. So I haven't totally written all the code of what these things mean, but the different types of objectives you can create. You can create a destination objective, means that the units will attempt to get to that location or one of the locations that it covers. You can have a type of patrol, which means it'll just pick one of the fields or one of the locations, and then simply just patrol through those records, right? So in other words, the best way of doing that is you set up a objective that covers um, uh, this whole zone, and then you have a unit linked to it that says I'm going to go there and patrol, and it'll basically just randomly move through this zone looking for things. And if it finds things, then I haven't written this stuff yet, but when it finds stuff, then it'll prosecute it and attack it, right? And you can also have an objective type called destroy base. So what that means is I don't want to get there necessarily. I will get there if I need to, but I really want to just destroy that base. Okay, so that would be a way of like setting a objective here. Let's say with one of the objectives, I'm going to go ahead and create one. All right, I'm going to create a objective logic. I'm going to move it up here, and I'm going to set its type as destroy base, and I'm going to add. Yeah, I forgot to do that on this one. I'll have to do that too. You have to add this hex to coverage, otherwise it doesn't know where it is, right? So this objective basically is an objective that says at this location, whatever if a unit picks up this as its objective, then its objective is to destroy that base through whatever means it has. If it doesn't have cruise missiles, then I guess it's gonna roll right up to it and try to attack it. Okay. Um, Now you can specify some things. Like for instance, let's go back to this guy, right? Because this one makes more sense. All right. So what I'm going to do is I want this group to follow this objective. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split out the 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 convoys real quick, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a little elegant about how I assign this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this objective, I'm going to put it just on the fast convoys. Well, first of all, let me first do what I want to do, which is add in this hex to coverage. Okay, so boom. So now this objective represents this location. Okay. All right. And oops. Come on, you dummy. All right. I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to link it to the Unix and hex. Okay. So now I'm going to drag it back over to here. Okay. So now you're going to see that these ships have links to these two deployments, which means when it's deployment time, it'll pick one of these deployments, and then once it's finished with the deployments, it'll not have links to these anymore, and it'll instead then try to find an objective. Now currently it will only have one objective assigned to it. Okay, and if you notice, what I've added in is I've given you the ability to set ships up so that they, depending on how you set them up as their roles, it'll determine the types of missions that they might assign themselves to. Okay, so here's the Jarrett. I'm going to put this to here. And I want to show you something real quick. Okay, so notice in the game now, when it loads up units, it automatically assigns them some default roles that these will use from an AI side. If they aren't AI, then ignore it. But if they are being played by the AI, you can specify what they try to do. So their primary role for frigates, I've given them a few different primary roles that they can have. They can have an escort primary role, they can have an anti-sub, and they can have, no, that's it, right? So what that means is that if you set their primary role to be escort, then what they're going to do is they're going to wait when they're trying to figure out what they want to do. They're going to wait to see if anything else in their hex gets a primary mission. And if it does, then their mission will just become whatever that thing's mission is. They'll just escort it. If they don't have anything to escort, then they'll fall to their secondary role of anti-sub. And so what does that mean? Well, so if you, depending on how you want to do it, right? So let's think about logically what we'd want to happen in this mission. We want this group basically to make it to the Malaya Atoll. We want it to drop off its troops. Okay, so if we look at this here, it'll show. Oops. Wait a minute. This guy. He's destroyed base. This guy's a different one. He's a destination. Okay. All right. Remove units when complete. Yes. Remove link when complete. Yes. VP multiplier. Okay, so if you have multiple objectives, and on this one particular objective, you'll get all the VPs, but on another objective, say it's a little closer in, you only get half the VPs. See, these are the different options I'm giving you. I'm giving you 1.5 times, 2 times, half, and quarter, or 1. Okay, so in other words, you can set up different objectives and specify the VP multiplier of them. And then what the logic's going to do is when a unit reaches those, that's actually assigned to that. So in this case, it wouldn't be the escorts, right? The escorts aren't technically really assigned to this mission. They're assigned to an escort mission for the 2 fast convoys. But when the fast convoys get there automatically, so when the AI player moves these guys over to here and reaches here, there'll be logic that will detect that they reached that objective, and then it'll automatically remove and unlink all the ships from that particular objective. Okay? So the two FCs will be removed. It'll calculate the VPs, and it'll give those VPs to the side. So one benefit that's coming out of this automated stuff is that um, it's gonna. I'm trying to make it so that it tracks VPs by itself, and that you don't have to worry about it. Right? It'll automatically start calculating VP. I'll try to extend that to even doing it for the non AI side, but definitely for the VP side or for the AI side, it'll definitely calculate that. So so what else can we do? So it has one objective right now. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to assign these two frigates. I'm just going to move them out of here just temporarily because I want to give them their own orders, okay, that they will ignore at first because they'll be in the same hex, but I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so after these frigates finish dropping off those guys, then likely what we're going to want them to do is probably do some type of they'll try to do some type of anti-sub thing or something, right? So I'll probably just want them to patrol this area, right? But they may want to patrol this area too. So just to give it some like optionality, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create two new objective logics. All right, I'm going to put one objective logic in here. I'm going to have it be of type patrol, and I'm going to have it use all this zone. And then I'm going to create another one. Create objective logic. I'm going to move it here, and I'm going to have it cover this zone, type patrol. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two, and I'm going to put them over here. You know, I could either move the frigates there or move this there. Remember, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't matter where this objective is. It just matters that it covers this area, right? So I'm going to say link units to hex, and I'm going to move it back. And then same thing with this guy. I'm going to move him over here, link it, and then move it back. Okay, so essentially, now I'm going to move these guys here in this thing. Okay, so now essentially what I've done is through this linkages, the way it'll work is the game will start. This group as a whole will pick a deployment because it's linked to these two deployment areas. It'll figure out which deployment area goes in. It either goes into this deployment area, which is right around here, or this deployment area, which is right around here. Actually, let's break the link there because he's not supposed to go there. But I was showing it just for giggles. So instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move this guy over here and notice remove link to units in hex. Okay, so now he isn't linked to anybody. So if I move it back over here, these guys aren't linked to this anymore. So, um, so when this game starts, these four guys together as a block will be linked to this deployment logic. Thus, they'll pick someplace in here to start. Then they'll pick an objective. Because two of them are set for escort, they're going to wait, and it's first going to see if there's anybody else in this hex that already does have a objective, which would be the FCs. The FCs are together in the same, so they'll pick the same one too, which they only have one to pick, so they'll pick this. And then the frigates will just be added in, and the game will automatically try to create a task force for them during the deployment phase. And then they're gonna, when I write the code for it, they'll execute there, they'll get here if they survive. The FCs will disappear, you'll get VP, and then the frigates will then go into a series then they'll determine what their next objective is. At that point, they don't have anything else to latch onto, so they'll create their own little task force and they'll likely pick together either a patrol here or a patrol here. So as you can tell, right, that's a very simple example. But if you could create a very complex series of things that it could choose from and different areas it could go, and so that's the strategy that I'm going to be using. So what I've done now is I've gotten the code where you can now set up all these linkages, and it will go through the deployment phase and utilize the deployment logics and the objective logics to assign an objective. The next thing I need to do now is have it automatically go through the orders and actually pick those objectives and actually try to move there. And then as it's moving, have it attack things if it sees things in range. Have it, do all the cool stuff that we want the automated player to do. So hopefully this explains a little bit how my process is, and hopefully it's something that you think it will work. Um, but this is what I'm working toward. It's probably going to take me a little while to get a first version out where we can start utilizing this. And then the goal would be that if it does work, then I plan on having it collect data on what choices the AI uses and what the end result is. Like if it chooses this strategy, what is the ending VP it earns, right? And then if you do that and you collect all that data, then you can essentially now start utilizing AI to start feeding that information so that it now knows, hey, over the 1,000 times it's been played, every time it chooses this, it has a much better chance of scoring VP than if it did a patrol route, right? Um, that's the goal, right? So if anybody has any questions about, or want to help me out with that, let me know. If you think this is cool, let me know that as well. I plan on putting this video out and then putting a post up. The code that actually does this is not going to be out yet. I plan on waiting until I have something that works a little better before I actually release it. But I wanted to give you a good status on it. And the next video we'll do will be probably something that shows how it navigates to get there and how it reacts to, say, enemy sightings and stuff like that. That's where I'm hoping to get to next time. All right. Well, really appreciate your time, and I hope this was entertaining for you. And until next time, I'll see you on the Facebook. Bye bye.